Hello, everybody, and welcome to the White Hatter YouTube News Show. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Darren. You can beam anywhere and everywhere around the world.
It's about
drop down menu.
Google hit with more than 20,000 geofence warrants from this $49 malware or so. What? Malware. So but again, iCloud is not an encrypted environment anyway.
I know.
So
do they use laser?
No.
Light.
They were able to open the person's computer that was protected by Windows Hello. At the beginning said, no, we weren't breached. And then a couple days later, yeah, we were breached.
Straight up.
It needs to be like...
Stand straight up.
It's right here.
See, I'm standing straight up. He's a little taller than I
need an extra. Do you want to make sure your significant other doesn't know where you're shopping, what gifts you're going to get? Buy the Faraday Pocket. Ineffective malware affecting Mac and PC, Discord being used to spread viruses, and fake Windows 11 installs are making their way among the internet.
Will allow an identity thief what they need to get a credit card under your name. Oh, you lost somebody else had your phone? Oh, who was that? Somebody else.
It got stolen.
I just need to talk to him.
I was at the gym and it got stolen on my locker, which is a common thing that happens.
Right. Oh, and how come you have it on you now? I kind of feel like the old style news. Hi, Darren with CKDA here. Just thought it's right.
How the Bumble dating app revealed any user's exact location.
Oh, I better delete it off my phone. I'm joking. I don't have Bumble. What are you doing? What are you doing? You know, if I'm a criminal.
Next one, Zoom has made
Zoom Z-O-O-M, Box 350, Boston, Mass. Oh, you were dressed up like a dinosaur yesterday.
That was a personal project, but yes.
You're trackable, right? You're trackable.
Everyone walk around with a Faraday Pocket.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, that would be a great invention where you now invent pants that have Faraday pockets built right into them.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Dr. Court. How you brought yourself to where you are today?
Wanting to be generous and accommodating.
Work with young people.
We decided to do some background research on these three major mobile ISPs, what's clearly prohibited and could in fact be a violation of their terms of service.
We thought this would be an opportunity to create a video about general buying and selling safety tips on the internet.
Created a version 2 that they call the Donashi Scholar, and which is specifically designed for you.
About a new mobile phone that was on the market called the Wise Phone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unanswered Questions. Sometimes we just don't get enough time to answer all the amazing questions from students during our live broadcast. Recent bug in Meta, Facebook, and Instagram proves you cannot always trust a password. AI cybercrime is happening right now and is likely going to be happening more. We wish to recognize these extraordinary and outstanding people by presenting them with the White Hatter Medallion. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the White Hatter live virtual broadcasting studio. My name is Brandon.
I'm Darren.
And in today's live chat, we're going to be talking about BC's new proposed bill, the Intimate Images Protection Act.
But I think before we do that, I think it's important that all our viewers know that we're not lawyers. We don't pretend to be lawyers in the real world or in the online world either. However, we're pretty good at understanding case law and sharing case law and some of our thoughts on where this piece of legislation is going to be going.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with who we are online investigators, so we do deal with lawyers, police, and individuals who may find themselves in these situations that we are going to be discussing. So we bring quite a breadth of
Understanding resources.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty cool. We're actually honored by the fact that the BC government actually during the drafting of this legislation reached out to us on more than one occasion, given our experience. I think as a company, the amount of pro bono work that we did with survivors of this type of crime was significant. So we had a lot of experience in dealing with this and helping survivors, both adults and teens, get these types of pictures down. So the government turned to us to ask us lots of questions about what we thought, what was the protocol, all those types of things, which was really cool. So it didn't surprise us when the announcement was made that this was coming. We've known that for about a year now.
Yeah, so speaking of the announcement, if you're not familiar with what exactly we're talking about, last week actually, the BC government announced that they are proposing legislation in order to create what is known as the Intimate Images Protection Act. And this kind of expands what we already have here in Canada under the criminal code of distribution of an intimate image without consent.
Yeah, so we actually have that in law. It's a federal criminal code section, applies to every province and every territory across our country, that if somebody takes your intimate image without consent and then shares it, posts it, distributes it in any way, it is illegal in our country.
Yes. So this is the actual piece of legislation. I want that button. That's the button I want. Nope, I want that button. There we go. That's the button I want. So this is not an actual law as of the recording of this live chat.
No, it's made it past the first reading.
Yes.
Right? So they still have a couple more readings to go to pass it into law.
So you can take a read of it on the BC Legislature website. Given the current makeup of the ledge, I would assume this is going to be passed without any or much opposition.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a lot of opposition to this, and I would suspect that this will be put into power probably within the next couple of months for sure. But I do think that it's important that everybody viewing, because we may have viewers from across our country, know that this legislation is not unique to British Columbia. However, our legislation is unique in a way, but other provinces also have legislation that's pretty similar, right, Brandon?
Yeah, so we spent some time over the week kind of combing through.
You did.
Okay, I did. I like getting into the weeds.
Yeah, oh boy.
Looking across Canada, and actually this is not the first province in Canada to do this. We're actually kind of late to the game.
We are.
So what we have is, let me show you up on my screen here. There are 7 other provinces here in Canada that have some kind of intimate image protection legislation. British Columbia is in orange because obviously it's just proposed, not law yet. But the other provinces do. Some do not, although some have legal court rulings that kind of...
Yeah, we'll talk about those, because I think that case law in those other jurisdictions will definitely have an impact on maybe what our tribunal is going to say here, because that's the other thing that makes our legislation unique. Although we're late to the game, I must say that the province actually did their homework really well on drafting this legislation. Like, they really have. They put a lot of thought into it, and there's no doubt that they consulted with other provinces who've got the similar law, and ours is pretty unique. And one of the ways it's unique is by this right here, right?
So here in British Columbia, we have something that is known as a civil resolution tribunal. And this is unique to BC. This is fairly new. I would expect other provinces to, sooner than later, probably have something similar.
Yeah.
Just because what I've heard is it's been really quite effective.
Yeah, I think traditionally what happens on incidences like this in the other provinces, you have to go to either criminal court or a civil court to have whatever in those provinces are required under the Act. And one of the things that we hear clearly from survivors, I don't like using the word victim, I call them survivors of this type of crime, is that their most important and number one thing they want the pictures down. Because the longer the pictures stay up, the more harm it does, right? So their number one priority is to get the pictures down. Well, traditionally, before this Act, in order for that to happen, the only way they could do it was through a court process, either the criminal court to get an order from a judge or through a civil process. And both of those, number one, they take a lot of time to do, so it's not something that happens immediately. And number two, once you're involved in the criminal and civil process, it becomes very public, which is sometimes something that survivors don't want to have happen. And so sometimes they don't even want to go criminal. They just want to deal with it in other measures. So that is what this piece of legislation does. It basically bypasses the criminal and the traditional criminal and civil process and creates this tribunal which expedites the process, right?
Yeah, so it's not as if legislation actually creates a tribunal.
No.
This tribunal already exists.
This is just something else coming on their plate.
Part of the legislation is that they're adding this into the responsibilities of the tribunal. And the thing about it, it's an online.
Right.
Like it's an internet-based tribunal. So you submit your claims and case of experts review it and they rule on the evidence presented.
Yeah, and the powers of the tribunal, correct me if I'm wrong, is twofold. Number one, they can issue orders that they can be served on individuals as well as social media vendors, as well as people who are hosting these pictures to have the pictures taken down. And number two, it can also award damages to the survivor, financial damages, right, as well. And we're waiting to hear what those damages are, because that's going to be a part of the regulations from what I understand, and those haven't come out yet.
Correct.
So it'll be interesting to see what that happens, but that's what makes this piece of legislation also very unique here in British Columbia compared to the other provinces.
Yeah,
right?
because when you think about it, so if looking at the criminal law we have here for distribution of an intimate image, okay, you got police involved, there's a court involved.
Right.
Well, with this situation, you basically go to their website and you submit your claim that way,
Right.
which is the intended purpose is to just make it faster and more efficient.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we consulted on was, because we had designed a process to expedite the process prior to this legislation to help survivors that connected with us to get these things down as quickly as we could. But I guess the question under the legislation is, what is an intimate image?
Yeah.
Right? What's an intimate image?
So if this is a new term for you,
Yeah.
an intimate image, and there's been a more common term that's been used, at least in media, that will usually refer to something known as revenge pornography.
I hate that word, right? Because pornography is kind of, it connotates adult entertainment. There's nothing entertaining about this, number one.
Correct.
And so the other thing, I like to call this tech-based sexual abuse, right? That's what it is. It's tech-based facilitated sexual abuse. That's what it is, right? But it's known in law as an intimate image. So under the Act, Brandon, and what does it say? And it's my understanding that under the Act, it kind of echoes what the criminal code is, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I actually pulled it out here for everyone to kind of take a
Blows my
look
full
at.
screen. Let's have a look.
Let me show it for all of you. There it is. So in Section 1 of the Act, it has the definition of what an intimate image is. So intimate image means a visual recording or visual stimulus representation of an individual, whether or not the individual is identifiable and whether or not the image has been altered in any way. We'll talk about that in a second, in which the individual is being depicted as engaging in a sexual act, nude or nearly nude. We'll talk about that. Exposing the individual's genitals, organs, regions of breasts in relation to which the individual has reasonable expectation of privacy at. That one's also interesting. And in cases of recordings, the time the recording was made and if distributed at the time of distribution. Those are the general sort of definitions of what the intimate image is.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this basically mirrors what's in the criminal code, right?
Yeah, so the criminal codes, I pulled that one up here, section 162.1 of Canada's criminal code. And this came into effect, I think,
2017, I think.
16, 17?
16, 17.
I think the bill was 2016, passed and effective in 2017. Section 1, it's smaller text, but essentially it defines intimate, naked, nude photo, what these are, as in Section 2, Intimate image means a visual recording of a person made by any means, including photographic, film, or video recording, in which the person is nude, exposing their genital organs, anal region, or breasts, or is engaged in explicit sexual activity, in respect to which at the time of recording, those parts are not as important. It's section A, the part A there is the most important part of the definition of what is classified as an intimate image.
So I think what's important for the viewers to know then is under the criminal code, the federal piece of legislation, it doesn't cover deep fakes, right? So that's what makes our legislation a little unique. Now, under the criminal code, there's another section called defamatory libel that police and prosecutors could maybe target somebody for when it comes to deep fakes. But there's no doubt, like I actually agree with one of our friends who's actually a privacy lawyer and an internet lawyer in Nova Scotia, David Fraser, and he's done a great YouTube on this.
Check out the YouTube channel.
Check out
I'll
his
put a
YouTube.
link in the description below.
He actually has done a really good about a 5-minute video on the issue of the criminal code when it comes to these deep fakes, which we totally agree. Like we do think that the criminal code should actually have a specific section for deep fakes. But that's kind of the difference between the two, right?
Comparing and contrasting, so the BC legislation, if passed and affected, mirrors similar but also expands upon.
Right.
There's a couple other bits of language that the criminal code section does not include, primarily nearly nude and then expectation of privacy.
So let's talk about this thing called nearly nude. And the reason I want to talk about that is because when we go and do presentations in schools and we're talking about things around sextortion, sexting, nudes, and intimate images, the type of questions that we get from the teens is just unbelievable. Like anybody who says that teens today can't think deeply are totally inaccurate. They can think very deeply, like they really drill down deeply. So I can pretty well guarantee that the teens are going to say to us, Darren, Brandon, what is a nearly nude or what is a semi-nude?
The reason why we say that is because when we do our live broadcasting with students in schools is we have enough content to do like a blog post, an article posting on it, but I've collected all the questions on what students have asked us already. What is an intimate image, or what about this situation or that situation? And there's
feet pictures, right?
Feet pictures are quite a common question in our Q&A period.
They are.
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
And there's other things like abs and whatnot students will ask. So, this is an interesting question because when this legislation was announced, news was picking up on it. Yeah. So I was looking at the comments from people, and one comment was really interesting to me. There was someone who actually asked, who dictates near nude? And that is a wonderful and that's a smart question because that is a really good question.
In fact, one of the things that you asked me, because of my experience in policing, you said, hey, Darren, like, what would be your definition of a nearly nude? And my comeback to you was, I said, well, sometimes we have to look at what the spirit of the law, and, going through all the court cases that I've gone through in my 30 years in policing, lots of times I heard the judges at all levels say that, we can't see into the future. So we need to take laws and apply them today. And we have to look at the spirit of the law and applying it to the spirit of the law. So my comment to you at the time was, well, I think a nearly nude would be something like where maybe it's somebody who identifies as a teen female. She's got her hand over her naked breasts, or her nipples are covered, she's angled slightly, maybe wearing underwear, and take a picture in a privacy of her bedroom that she's sending to a partner or to another person privately. That would be considered a semi-nude. And your comeback to me was, well, maybe it isn't, right? Like, nobody's ruled on this, but you've done some research in the other provinces, and there's some kind of case law on what it could be, right?
Yeah, given the vagueness of that sort of language, I was like, okay, but where's that line drawn? Because if we're going to be going to students in BC at least and letting them know, hey, fully nude and nearly nude images, distributing it without consent, they're going to ask us,
right?
Where's that line?
Right.
So over the past week, I took all the legislations in the 7 other provinces of Canada.
I told you need to go to law school, right? Like, I know you got your master's in social media and communication.
I'm too busy doing what we're doing right now.
You need to go. Hey, David, do you know that if Brandon can go to law school? He's probably watching.
Can anyone go to law school?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
So I went through. I went to the database of where all these
Canley.
That's a wonderful database
resource. Yeah.
So I looked at all court cases where the Intimate Image Protection Acts across all the provinces have been mentioned.
Yeah.
And given these acts are fairly new, like most of which around 2018, 2017,
Yeah.
there's only like a handful. Like I can count on my fingers how many times these legislations have been mentioned in courts.
Right.
I found 2 instances referring to definitions that I want to share with everybody right now. So there was a court case in Manitoba in 2020, and I highlighted the important part here in red. And let me just highlight for all of you to see that. In the situation, various stages of undress of underwear and were taken in circumstances given rise to the expectation of privacy. Now, I think that is a very important quote from this court case.
So I think what that court case does is it kind of supports what I just said, right?
Yeah.
If it's a picture that is that was taken that is semi-nude, right, in the privacy of wherever you are, and you're sending it based upon privacy to another person, well, then that would be considered an intimate image, right? And now you further went on, and what's interesting is you found another piece of case law from Alberta, right?
So for context, across Canada, 2 other provinces in their Protection Act legislations, which are already enacted, they have nearly nude in the classification of an intimate image. But the other provinces typically have something with a section called reasonable expectation of privacy. So if an image is sent to you in the sense of a private situation, that is also classified as an intimate image.
But then again, the argument is what's reasonable to you may not be reasonable to me, right? So it's interesting, right?
So Manitoba is one of those particular places where they have that expectation of privacy, which we have here as well in
our legislation,
which likely will be passed. So that's very interesting. And then there was another court case. This is the only other one that I could find. Again, only a handful of courts even mentioned these legislations. Was right here. Plaintiff correctly points out that the act does not protect privately sharing such images, which is also a potential gap in the framework. So this is the Alberta court. Now, to refer to my notes here, because I've been doing a little table of referring to what all the different courts have said. I don't know why I do that.
It's because you're Brandon. That's what you do.
I like tables.
Yeah, that's what you do.
Kind of referring to my notes here. Under the Alberta one, see, Alberta does not have nearly nude defined, nor do they have the reasonable expectation of privacy. So the Alberta one is very almost exactly similar to what the Criminal Code of Canada would say.
Right.
So this is interesting because the court basically identified, we don't have that. So at least they were referring to the definition.
Right.
So it's telling me that courts are considering this, which is very interesting.
Because one of the things that we were playing what ifs all over the place, right? With this new legislation, what if it's a person on a beach, and that beach is a public beach, and they're walking, and let's say they identify as female, their breasts are uncovered, they're walking along the beach, somebody takes a picture of it in a public place. Would that fall under the definition of a semi-nude under the new legislation here in the province of British Columbia? I don't think
there's no expectation. You're in public, which there's no expectation of privacy.
That's the issue, right?
But if you do it in your bedroom to your partner,
that's different. So
which that Manitoba case was referring to.
That's right. So I think that's what it comes down to. I think it comes down to context and privacy. And as well, we know that in the Supreme Court of Canada's decision of Barbash, where they carved out an exception for teens who are sending intimate images in a consensual private relationship that's consensual, non-exploitive in nature, it's not illegal.
Barbash 2015.
Right. But the Supreme Court actually said in their decision that they strongly also recommended that if somebody was going to send that intimate image, that they also attach a message that says not to be shared for your eyes only. So by doing that as well, I think it would only strengthen your position under the new legislation here in British Columbia.
Now, could the BC Tribunal Court make a different ruling on that?
Maybe.
They could.
Maybe.
They could.
Maybe.
So, but if we're using the language as is written and given sort of the inklings of other courts in Canada, this is important because, again, if we are presenting to students and we're saying to them, fully nude and nearly nude, they're going to ask what a nearly nude is.
Right.
So we would have to tell them, well, under this example from Manitoba, you know, if you send your partner an image, but you have underwear, just underwear covering you,
or bra and underwear. Let's say it's female. Bra and underwear.
Yeah,
in your bedroom
underwear.
privately, right?
Yeah, just
underwear. And then you send it privately to an individual consensually. I think although your breasts are covered by the underwear and so is your other genitalia, I still think that that would fall under the definition under the new legislation as a semi-nude. But again, we would have to wait for the tribunal to make a decision on that. But based upon the...
Given that that's how Manitoba ruled on it.
That's right, yeah.
I would be surprised if BC does not follow suit.
I agree.
So we have to let a teen know, like, oh yeah, you send that to your partner and you have that semi-nude of your partner on your phone and you show it to your best friend, your partner can come after you for civil remedies.
Potentially.
But
right.
But at least they could submit the claim, and the tribunal has to rule on that.
Right, for sure.
Which is interesting because how many influxes of reports is the tribunal going to get from this?
That's something else we don't know.
They're going to have to deal with that, right?
Now, there are some other things, like a good example. Our legislation talks about deep fakes, right?
Deep fakes. Well, it doesn't call out deep fakes directly.
Now, just before we get going, just for their viewers, deep fakes is where an individual will take an image of yourself that they've screen captured, either a picture or video of your face, and then they morph it or they Photoshop it into a pornographic picture and make it out to be you or into a pornographic video, right? That's kind of what deep fake, morphing technology, stealthing technology, but it's commonly known as deep fake. That's what that's all about. And we've helped a couple of teens and adults deal with that issue as well.
Yeah, so I pulled out some language from the bill. I'll flash it up here on the screen for you all to see. Kind of small, but the important part's in red. So under the definition of an intimate image, it says whether or not the image has been altered in any way.
Right.
Now that one is very interesting.
Yeah, because I think that falls under the deepfake technology, right?
It's
now,
altered.
Yeah, it's definitely altered. Now, David Fraser, actually, he says that it may be somewhat of a challenge when we get to courts, and he's the lawyer, not us. But it would be interesting because my feeling is it would, because in order for somebody to create a deep fake, they still have to take a likeness of you.
There has to be a source image.
That's the issue, right? And that source image has to be of you to represent
Correct.
you. Right?
Well, right now there's a class action in the U.S. again for artists going against ChatGPT, DALL-E, and Midjourney because their images are being used in potential violation of copyright.
Right.
So they're going after these AI generating image platforms because their source images are being used without their explicit consent. So, I mean, that would be an interesting ruling on how that goes.
But this is interesting because deepfake technology is going to become an issue. It's already an issue. It is being weaponized. We know that already. We've helped a couple of clients deal with that very issue.
Even before deepfakes, there was a situation that we worked with where a young person, their face was basically just directly photoshopped onto the image of a porn star.
That's right.
So even prior to deepfakes, we were really seeing this and dealing with this.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. But it's nice to see that unlike the criminal code that doesn't really deal with this issue, this legislation does pick that up and run with it.
Yeah.
Right? So kind of cool.
So some other parts in the bill that I think might be important just to talk about and highlight what are the main key points I want everyone to kind of be aware of. That is Section 5. Application for expedited intimate image protection order. So this is where that tribunal will actually make a ruling where you get to submit your claim to them through an online portal. They make a ruling, and it's designed to be a fast takedown, where when this tribunal actually makes their rulings, can order a person to destroy all copies in their possession, make reasonable efforts to make the images unavailable. They can make orders to websites to have the images deleted, or to search engines having those images de-indexed from their basically attempting to scrub the internet from that image.
Now, that's one of the benefits of this piece of legislation, because if we were to do that through the criminal process or through the traditional civil process, that would take weeks and weeks and weeks to accomplish. The whole idea of this is that this will happen very quickly. I actually think in less than a day. is what I'm thinking, right? It'll happen fairly quickly.
We'll have to see what the regulation says.
You're
So
right.
the Attorney General of British Columbia, they have to write a regulation, which is
Right.
basically not a law per se. It's more of their
Rules of the road.
rules of the road on how they actually enact this. So it'll be interesting to see when that's released, what that's going to look at, and if there's any timelines they're going to put on the tribunal in order to make those decisions.
Because again, I think the number one concern that we've heard from survivors that we've worked with on this issue is that they want, as soon as they know it's up, they want it down as quickly as possible, because the longer it stays up, the more harm it creates, right? So,
Yeah, precisely.
yeah.
So, and then the other section I think is important. It's small text, but I'll give you a brief overview. Is Section 6, which is claims for damages. And that's basically, okay, someone has distributed your intimate image, fully nude or nearly nude, without your consent, or they've made threats. That was also important. There's a section in here that says if someone even threatens to take your image and distribute it,
Right.
it's a violation. So that's basically all that one is. It's just there you can get civil remedies.
Right, and again, we're waiting for the regulations to come out, because I think the regulations are supposed to basically say what those fines are going to be.
Yeah.
And they'll probably would be within a specific, I think, amounts, right? Basically, but we're waiting to see what that is going to be with the regulations as they come out with the final draft or the final order.
And then there is the Section 7, applications on behalf of deceased.
This is a good one too.
This one's good. You can probably talk about that one.
Yeah, I mean, this one is, a really good example of this is, let's say you have a child, that child takes their life by suicide because their nude goes public. And as a result of that, the young person feels like there's nothing else to live for, so they then take their life by suicide. So in those types of cases, if the individual does take their life by suicide, it allows the parent or somebody on their behalf now to continue to launch an action civilly against the person who posted the publicly without the picture or video without consent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one is very important.
Yeah.
And then there is the Section 8, which essentially is applications respecting minors and others. So a parent can make an application on behalf of their child who may not have the abilities to actually go through the process, or they're uncomfortable with the process. A parent and caregiver can do that as well. And other
I think this is a really good one for cases where parents have a child who's emotional and psychological. They don't have the ability to communicate well.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, this section provides the parent or the caregiver the ability to take action under the act.
Yeah, other provinces have something similar to that. I think 2 of them have something similar. That parent can do that application for their child.
And it's nice that it's fully spelled out in the BC legislation. Like I said, BC did a good job in drafting this piece of legislation, right?
Yeah, being the last of the party, where they're the 8th province to have this Protection Act.
We've learned from everybody else.
They've taken the best parts of all the other ones and go, here you go. So Nova Scotia was the first.
They were.
And that was back in, when was that again? Nova Scotia was back, all the way back in,
But I remember David Fraser again telling us, or sharing with us, that when it was first launched, there were all kinds of issues with it. But that's to be expected, because it's the first piece of legislation of its kind, right, that came out. So, that's one of the benefits for being one of the, there's still a couple of other provinces and territories that still need to come to the table. But, there's no doubt that BC has learned for the good and the bad of other provinces and what they've experienced, and built that into this legislation, which again, it's a good piece of legislation, right?
And the last important part that I think I want to share with everybody is burden of proof. Yeah. This one is very powerful.
So can I talk about that just for a second?
Go ahead.
Under criminal law, the onus is on the Crown or the person who's making the accusation to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person did what it is they did. The person has they're innocent until proven guilty, basically, right? In civil law, it's based upon the balance of probabilities. However, what this piece of legislation does is it does the reverse onus. It puts the onus on the person who made the intimate image or video public.
Yeah, so you're going to have to prove that.
Or the person, not when you say you not the survivor.
I'm being accused.
Okay.
Right. So I'm being accused.
Yeah.
I have to prove that it was an accident.
Yeah, that's right.
Basically. And not every province has this.
However,
Manitoba is one, but literally yesterday, Manitoba announced that they have a bill in their legislature, amendments to their Intimate Image Protection Act, which basically adds the reversal on the onus of proof.
so like we learned from Manitoba, because they came to the table before BC did. Well, now Manitoba is now learning from BC because
we should have added that in there.
which is kind of the way that things go, right? Because every province, there's some people that are saying that we should just make this a national standard. Well, in order to do that, you have to get a ruling from the Supreme Court, right? Because every province has its own
and different ways of doing things.
Yeah, that's
the BC civil method is different with the online tribunal.
That's right.
So you'd have to have like a national online tribunal.
That's right.
And I mean, that's...
So what's happening now is each provinces are looking at everybody else going, hey, what's working, what's not working? Okay, if this is not working, what are you doing to make it work? And so they're kind of building upon one another, right? Kind of like a Lego approach.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it has its benefits. It can be slow, but again, the BC legislation has done a pretty good job.
Yes,
they have.
Given that 7 other provinces have something very similar,
Yeah.
again, I would expect this to be passed without any
Now,
major changes.
although we do feel that this legislation is a really good tool, it's another great arrow in the quiver to give to survivors to help, number one, try to get these things down, and number two, hold the person who posted them without consent accountable from a civil standpoint. We have identified some challenges, right?
There are some challenges, hypothetically, I think we should be addressing, because we don't want this to be presented in a way that's going to solve the problem altogether.
Yeah, it's not all sugar and spice and everything's nice,
No.
right? Like there's some snips and snails and puppy dog tails that we have to consider, right?
This is Canadian law applying to Canadians.
Right.
So you get the classic example, and I'm sure people are probably going to ask, what if the images are shared by someone who is not a Canadian citizen, not on Canadian soil, or the images are stored in a server that doesn't respect Canadian laws?
So a really good example of that. Here we here at the White Hatter have helped a couple of adults where that has in fact happened, where after they were in a relationship split up. During the relationship, there were consensual images and videos sent within the context of that relationship. They were adults at the time, so legal consensual adults. There was a relationship split up. As a result of the split up, one of the partners decided to take the video and the pictures and weaponize it and then post it on a site that specifically hosts these types of videos for profit. And the server of that company that was doing that was located in a country, Russia, that would not necessarily abide by Canadian law, right? So when we
Not
made
surprised.
application under what's called the DMCA, the Digital Media Copyright Act, to have this thing taken down, they basically ignored us and said, go fill your boots to us because we're not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
But so therein lies the challenge, right? Now, it has been my experience because, again, this legislation, it's BC legislation, so it's Canadian legislation, applies to the province of British Columbia. So really it has no legal oomph outside of Canada and any other countries. Having said that, most of the major platforms, Meta, TikTok, Snap, all the big players that are out there, they've all basically said, and it's been our experience as well, that they will honor a legal document that is served on them from a Canadian legal process, right? Like most of them do that.
Most of them also have a brick and mortar location in Canada.
Correct.
As well. Not all of them do,
No.
but because they have such a strong North American presence,
Right.
they want to play nice.
Right.
And I think that's where this really has the most effect, because where this and all the other acts across Canada are effective are in situations where your intimate, romantic, physical partner is the one who is distributing your intimate images without consent,
Yeah.
where you know who they are, you can point the finger, they're here in Canada, and now these acts can take effect.
Yeah, I think this legislation is going to really work well in those situations where you sent an intimate image consensually to somebody who you either know, love, or trust.
And in
And
our
that-
experience, most of those situations, most of those partners aren't super skilled hackers.
No.
They're not going to go to websites that are not indexable or controlled by North America. Now,
We have had two where that is
we have had two, but most of the time,
Right.
they're showing them to like the Instagrams, the Facebooks of the world,
Right.
because that's the programs they use.
Right. But so again, I think that's going to be the challenge. I think it's important that people who are watching know that This legislation, like you say, is going to work really, really, really well in situations where the person who's posted it without your consent is somebody you either know, love, or trust, where you shared the picture in a consensual relationship privately, and now they take that and then they weaponize it and post it publicly. And then they post it on a site that is basically in a NATO-type country that basically will honor these types of documents, these legal documents, these takedown documents that are issued. However, there are going to be incidents where these intimate images and videos are going to be stored in places, in countries that we'll still not recognize. Now, although that happens, although the orders may not be effective in taking those videos or images down, because you still know who the person is, if it's somebody you either know, love, or trust, they can still be held to financial damages under the Act, right?
Yeah, although you may not get the image off the internet, you can at least address the person who was the one that put those images on that online platform that may not abide by Canadian law.
But I also believe, is any amount of money going to be enough, right? Because again, the emotional, psychological, physical, and social damage that this does to not just teens but also to adults as well is significant. But at least there is a financial consequence that can be issued under this new act.
Yeah, right? Speaking of that emotional struggle, having worked with teens who message us all the time on various challenges they may be experiencing, there have been times where teens have messaged us where they've claimed that their nude images were leaked on the internet. On our investigation of them describing what exactly happened, we came to the conclusion that it was actually not a nude image as defined in the criminal code.
But
because it was only a picture of them in their underwear, and it was leaked by their partner. We're talking about like a BC student, right? Where there wasn't really, this legislation didn't exist, so it was just a picture of underwear.
Right.
Given the nearly nude category now, so if someone leaks your underwear photo, all the important bits are covered. It's not a intimate image under the criminal definition. Now under the BC civil definition, it is.
This is why I think it will have somewhat of a deterrence effect on youth if education is done on this. And that's a part of what we do, right? Yes. Is that we educate the kids on the criminal and civil liability issues associated with this. So I do think that there may be somewhat of a deterrence effect, especially if the tribunal starts handing down decisions that will go after some youth. But what I think is really important is I don't think that this legislation will necessarily prevent these pictures from being posted or images being posted. However, it does hold the offender legally accountable for their actions. That's the beauty. So do I think it's going to have some deterrent effect? Yeah, I do. However,
it's the education part, because students are not going to know that, oh, hey, your partner sent you a underwear photo in the evening in their bedroom under the sense of privacy, and you now take that photo and you show it to your best friend. They may not have the understanding that there is now legislation. Potentially, that can be interpreted, given how the tribunal rules on this.
So, and that's the big change. So, and that's why knowledge and the understanding and application of that knowledge is power.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we need to be able to do as adults now is to educate the teens, educate the parents, and educate the educators in schools about this new law and how it could potentially fit into where teens and what they're doing today. Because before this legislation, it wasn't illegal, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're making, there could be, if you're making threats about it or extortion about it.
That's different.
There are different, like the actual act itself, but if there's other things attached to that, sure, there could be criminal consequences to that.
Correct.
And I think now that BC's on board, it makes our jobs a little bit easier because, yes, we can teach the criminal code to students across Canada because it's one code. The issue when we go to different provinces is that, well, it can be different from here to there.
Correct.
So now we can more easily have the same message across most of the provinces, going at least the ones that define nearly nude or have the exception of expectation of privacy.
Correct.
To let students know, given how one court's already ruled on this, if an image is sent to you in the sense of privacy and it's a private photo, you can't be sharing that or showing that to anybody without consent.
And especially if we're educating kids on the Barbash case, that if they are sending the intimate image, and even the adults as well, to make sure you attach a statement that this is for your eyes only. Not to
Which makes it much easier for the tribunal to assist you, because if you literally said to your partner, this is a private image only for you, and you now just show it to your best friend, well, there's no ifs, ands, or buts,
Right.
because it's what you had sent already.
Yeah, the other benefit to this legislation, we say this in our discussions with teens, is that it removes the shame factor. You know, like a lot of people will point their fingers at their survivors and say to them that, hey, listen, you should never have done that. But the issue here is that the shame should actually lie, their criminality, the civil consequences should actually be on the individual who took that intimate image that was sent with consent, with trust to that other person, and now that other person takes the consent and trust and breach it and then weaponizes it and posts it as a weapon. Those are the individuals that should be held not just criminally responsible, but now civilly responsible, which this does as well. And the other thing I think is important to know is that, yeah, you can go under this act, but there's nothing to stop somebody from actually going on with a further civil matter in civil court as well, right? So it allows for that as well.
The other challenge that you and I were hypothesizing the other night when we were discussing, what about this, what about that? Because that's what we do, because that's what students do to us all the time. So we need to be having some forethought on what potential situations might pop up. So I presented you the situation, and it's quite a well-known trope now in politics, where a
Trope, good word.
where a politician makes a goof on the internet.
Right.
What's their immediate response?
I was hacked.
Even if they were or not, they say hacked. And there have been some who've been called out going, no, you weren't actually hacked. You actually did that intentionally. Right. So some people kind of get out of trouble going, I was hacked.
That's why I think the reverse onus of this legislation, when I'll put the onus on the person who says I was hacked to prove it.
I think that's a problem though, because how are you? So let's say you were actually hacked. Let's say you download a bad program, it scours through your photos, someone finds an intimate image on your phone from your partner. They take that image and they post it on the internet. You didn't do that, someone stole it from your photo album. Let's say that happens.
Yeah, it potentially could happen.
It could happen.
Well, I think the onus is going to be on me now to go, well, I was hacked. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, maybe I'm going to have to hire a company, and there's lots of them now that can do a forensic audit on my device to see if maybe
How many normal, average, decent people are going to know how to prove they were hacked or not?
I don't know.
Right? Or sometimes you'll have to get a court order from a social network to show who's been logged into your account.
Right.
So I think this could create some challenges where a hacker or a scammer hacks into your account, they release a naked photo of your partner, you're now the prime suspect, if you will, and now you have to prove that it wasn't you. Mm-hmm.
I think one of the ways to maybe buffer that a little bit, or to kind of cushion yourself, is that once you're aware of that is happening, immediately notify your partner who's picture and says, hey, listen, just to let you know, those pictures that you sent me, they were private, but somebody broke into my computer and they're now posting this publicly. I'm attempting to get these things down. I mean, at least it kind of buttresses you a little bit.
I guess that would be up to the interpretation from the tribunal, going, if you had the full intention, when you became aware the image was posted and you took every step possible to remove it, are you still liable to that? Yeah. That will be an interesting situation.
Yeah, and there's going to be others that we just don't think about, right? There's going to be others out there. But I think the biggest one that people were asking is, what if the picture image is hosted on a server outside of the country? And we've answered that, right?
Yeah.
So.
And I think
we've covered it all.
I think that covers everything that we want to talk about. Any potential challenges? Now, yes, there are challenges, but this is wonderful in terms of what it provides British Columbians of any age, resources and tools, and tying it into the civil tribunal is just a wonderful, unique aspect in order to deal with these situations potentially faster than other provinces. That's your challenge, other provinces. How can you do better? Right. Because depending on how the regulations proposed and how the tribunal will actually handle these situations, it's given them the leverage and the regulations to have the flexibility to do that.
Right, for sure. Yeah, again, I mean, tip of our white hat to the province for putting the piece of legislation together that well thought out. Are there going to be some bumps? Sure, there's going to be some bumps, but that's where the ability to adapt, overcome, and improvise to those bumps. But I think in the vast majority of cases, it's going to be a real benefit to those who are survivors or experiencing this type of violent type of tech-facilitated sexualized abuse, right?
Yeah,
so,
most certainly. Sure. And we'll probably do another thing once likely the bill passes.
Yeah, give it a year. Let's see what happens. Yeah. And we'll go from there.
But definitely we'll be on top of this now that most provinces now have something in place.
And if there's anybody out there who wants to maybe talk to us a little bit further because you're looking maybe to put together a lesson plan for your kids or whatever, give us a call. Give him a call. He's the guy right now who's doing a lot of the research in this area. So
it's interesting because with my background in research, I've spent the last few years honing in on teen sexting behavior in the research, and a lot of research defines sexting as nude and semi-nude. Which mirrors very closely to what the language is in these legislations.
Interesting.
So it kind of works nicely in that. So definitely that's been a lot of reading. It's nice to see this synergy between research and legislation and enforcement.
Yeah. And I was and again, we were very honored that the province connected with us to basically talk to us about what our experience has been over these couple of years and what we've been doing to help survivors of this type of crime and what our recommendations would be to help strengthen this piece of legislation. So there you go. So my name's Darren.
And I'm Brandon. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you all next time, either in another live video like this or any other video on our YouTube channel, our interviews, our podcasts. There's a lot of resource. Check out the website, thewhitehatter.ca. That's like our landing page for all our resources. There's a lot there, and I'm sure we'll be expanding our parent web book to include this, mostly when it passes legislation and kind of summarizing what they are across Canada.
For sure.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.